The plane had just lifted off when the crying began, loud, desperate, and unrelenting. Passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sighing and exchanging glances. In first class, a young millionaire named Ethan tried everything to calm his baby daughter, but nothing worked. Her tiny fists waved, her face red from exhaustion. He looked helpless, sweat beading on his forehead as the cries echoed through the cabin. The flight attendants whispered softly, unsure how to intervene without offending the man everyone recognized from business magazines. A few rows back sat a single mother named Clara, holding her sleeping son. She could feel the tension in the air and the judgment toward the struggling father. Something in her heart ached. She knew that kind of helplessness all too well. For a moment, she hesitated. She wasn't rich. She wasn't anyone important, just a mother trying to make ends meet. But as she watched Ethan's trembling hands and the baby's tear-streaked face, something inside her told her she couldn't just sit there, ignoring the eyes following her. Clara slowly stood up and walked down the aisle. Ethan looked up, startled, when she stopped beside his seat. What she did next left everyone around her silent. Even the crying stopped. No one could believe what they were seeing. And in that quiet moment, something unexpected began, a connection that would change both their lives forever. But what Clara whispered next would leave the entire plane in disbelief. Ethan blinked, unsure what to say as Clara gently reached out for the baby. There was something calm and steady about her presence, the kind of warmth that didn't need words. Hesitant but desperate, he let her take his daughter. The baby whimpered once, then nestled into Clara's arms as if she had known her all along. Within minutes, the crying faded into soft hiccups, then silence. The passengers who had been annoyed moments ago now stared in quiet amazement. Ethan exhaled, his shoulders finally dropping. Clara hummed softly, a lullaby so tender it carried over the hum of the engines. Ethan watched, wondering how a stranger could soothe his child when he couldn't. "You've done this before," he whispered. She smiled faintly, eyes distant. "A few times," she said. Her voice carried both strength and sadness. There was a story behind it, one she wasn't ready to share. As the baby slept peacefully, Ethan noticed Clara's hands, tired, a bit rough, like someone who worked too hard for too little. Yet they held his daughter with the gentleness of pure love. He wanted to ask her name, her story, how she knew just what to do. But before he could, the plane hit a patch of turbulence, jolting them back into reality. Clara steadied herself, still cradling the baby. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Neither knew it yet. But that moment would change everything that came after. After the turbulence settled, the cabin lights dimmed. Most passengers closed their eyes. But Ethan couldn't stop watching Clara. She had handed his daughter back gently, whispering something soft that only the baby seemed to understand. He noticed the faint tear in her sleeve, the worn edges of her handbag tucked under the seat, signs of a life far different from his own. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, as if hardship had taught her grace. Curiosity mixed with guilt inside him. He wanted to thank her properly, maybe offer help, but something in her eyes warned him not to pity her. During the meal service, he tried to start a conversation. "You travel often?" he asked, attempting a smile. Clara hesitated before replying, "Not really, just trying to start over." Her words hung heavy between them. He sensed there was more, something she wasn't saying. She looked out the window, her expression distant. "Sometimes life takes everything," she murmured, "and then gives you one small chance to begin again." Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was admiration or something deeper. As the plane flew through the night, a flight attendant approached Ethan quietly, handing him an urgent message. His face paled. Clara noticed and asked if everything was all right. Ethan forced a weak smile, but his voice trembled when he said, "It's about the company. Something's gone wrong." And as the engines roared outside, both of them realized their journeys were about to collide in ways neither could imagine. Ethan stared at the message on his phone, his heart racing. The numbers didn't make sense. Millions lost in a single hour. A deal he had trusted had collapsed while he was 30,000 feet in the air. Panic began to creep in. His baby stirred in his arms, sensing his unease. Clara noticed his trembling hands and leaned closer, her voice calm but firm. "Whatever it is, you'll figure it out," she said. But Ethan shook his head. "You don't understand. Everything I've built, it's falling apart." For the first time since takeoff, the confident millionaire looked utterly human, frightened and uncertain. Clara wanted to say something comforting, but before she could, another announcement came through the speakers. A passenger in the back had fallen ill, and the crew was asking if there was a doctor on board. The air grew tense, every sound amplified. The baby started crying again, and Ethan, overwhelmed, couldn't focus. Clara instinctively took the baby, holding her close as she looked around. The cabin lights flickered slightly, the plane shuddering again in turbulence. Ethan's mind raced his business in crisis, his baby crying, the cabin filled with murmurs. It felt like everything was spiraling out of control. And then, as if the chaos wasn't enough, the sick passenger's condition worsened. The flight attendants scrambled, calling for assistance. Clara stood up again, the baby in her arms. Ethan looked at her, confused. "Clara, what are you doing?" he asked. She turned to him, eyes steady. something I can't ignore," she said, and walked toward the back of the plane. Clara moved quickly down the aisle as the flight attendants tried to stabilize the sick passenger, an older man who had collapsed near the restroom. His breathing was shallow, his face pale. Passengers were frozen, unsure how to help. Clara gently handed the baby to a nearby woman and knelt beside the man. Her movements were calm but urgent, like someone who had done this before. Ethan watched from a distance, stunned. For a moment it was as if the chaos had shifted from him to her. "Sir, can you hear me?" Clara said softly, checking his pulse. One of the flight attendants whispered, "Are you a nurse?" Clara didn't look up. "Used to be," she replied. The words hit Ethan like a jolt. This woman, who had comforted his child, was now saving a stranger's life, midair. But just as relief began to settle in, a new sound pierced the cabin, a sharp alarm from the cockpit. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing an unexpected systems issue. Please remain calm and stay seated." Gasps spread through the plane. Ethan stood, clutching the seat for balance as his baby began to cry again. Clara continued, chest compressions, ignoring the growing panic around her. The lights flickered once more, and the turbulence grew stronger. Ethan's thoughts raced. His company was collapsing, his child was terrified, and now the plane itself was in trouble. But what he didn't know yet was that Clara's past, the one she'd been running from, was about to collide with his in the most unexpected way. The plane jolted violently, and a few passengers screamed. Oxygen masks dropped from above, and for a brief, terrifying moment, everything seemed to blur into chaos. Ethan grabbed his baby, shielding her as the captain's voice broke through the static, assuring everyone that they were regaining control. Clara stayed beside the unconscious man, her hands steady even as the plane shook. "Stay with me," she whispered, not sure if he could hear. After a few more compressions, the man gasped a shallow, fragile breath and his eyes fluttered open. Relief rippled through the cabin, soft sobs mixing with nervous laughter. When the turbulence eased and the plane stabilized, Clara sank back in her seat, exhausted. Ethan looked at her, awe in his eyes. "You saved him," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No, just did what anyone would have done." But he could see in her expression that wasn't true. There was something deeper, a pain she was carrying. Hours later, after landing, paramedics rushed aboard. As they wheeled the man out, Clara froze. Ethan followed her gaze and saw the older man reach for her hand. "Clara," he rasped. Ethan looked between them, confused. Her eyes filled with tears. "He's my father," she whispered. "I haven't seen him in 7 years." The passengers watched in silence as she stood there, trembling. Ethan finally understood this flight wasn't an accident. It had brought together a broken millionaire, a lost daughter, and a crying baby. 3 souls meant to find each other when they needed it most. Outside the airport, the night air was calm after all the chaos. Clara stood beside her father as paramedics checked his vitals one last time. He looked weak but alive, his eyes filled with regret. "I searched for you," he whispered. She smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "And somehow, we found each other." "In the sky," she said softly. It felt unreal. The years of silence, the pain, and now this sudden reunion at 30,000 feet. Ethan approached, holding his baby, the little girl now peacefully asleep. "You were incredible back there," he said. "You saved him. You saved us all." Clara shook her head, but this time her smile reached her eyes. "Maybe we all saved each other," she replied, as the ambulance drove away. Ethan stood beside her, unsure how to say goodbye. His phone buzzed again with news about his company, but this time, he didn't rush to answer. For the first time in years, the numbers didn't seem to matter. "I don't know what's next," he said quietly, "but I'd like to figure it out. Maybe with some help."